Continuing on with reading history. Elizabeth was now demoted in her turn. Although she and her half-sister Mary remained daughters of the king and were recognized and brought up as such, their dubious legitimacy deprived them of all claims to the title Princess Royal. The birth of a son to Jane Seymour, who gladdened the heart of Henry VIII by finally presenting him with a male heir, reduced their importance accordingly, but had a pacifying effect on the royal family. Mary no longer had to give way to her younger sister, and both girls deferred to their brother quite naturally and with good grace. Their presence at court created no problems. King Henry had no other son, so it was not in his interest to cast doubt on their competence to occupy the throne. This was because by force of circumstance they were being held in reserve. Granting them a respectable status was essential in order to maintain their value on the marriage market. There had been some question when Elizabeth was born of betrothing her to the Duke of Angoulême, son of Francis I. When Henry proposed to marry her off to a nephew of Charles V, the latter refused on the grounds of her mother's life and death. The king did not wish his younger daughter's matrimonial stock to fall still further on the European market. However, Henry's conjugal life was becoming more and more notoriously chaotic. Having done her duty by giving birth to a son, Jane Seymour died, carried off by puerperal fever like so many other women of her day. Next, the king sought to contract a political marriage. None of his attempts to forge an alliance with Francis I succeeded. His reputation did him no favors. Mary of Guise, who was approached because of her tall stature and good health, declined. "I am tall," she said, "but I have a little neck." And she set sail for Scotland, where she married James V. Henry then turned his attention to Germany and opted for Anne of Cleves, on the strength of his ambassador's recommendation and a portrait by Holbein. The young woman landed at Dover and pressed on to London in spite of the atrocious weather, not wanting to delay her meeting with the king, who was awaiting her at Greenwich. Henry was dismayed and claimed that he liked her not. But what should he do? He could not back out without causing serious diplomatic ructions. So the marriage went ahead at Greenwich in January 1540. After several nights at Anne's side, however, Henry could not consummate the marriage. Meanwhile, innocent as a nun and chirpy as a bird in springtime, Anna saw nothing abnormal about her undisturbed nights. Convinced that a kiss was enough to engender a child, she failed to comprehend the advice offered by her ladies-in-waiting, who were alarmed by her bridegroom's ill humor. Only 6 months later, in July 1540, Henry asked for a divorce. Anna willingly agreed, on the condition that Henry not send her back to Germany. Relieved to have avoided an unpleasant scandal, the king assigned her a royal residence and a comfortable pension. Thus provided for, she lived out her life in peace, on amicable terms with all the royal family. Henry VIII proceeded to choose himself a beautiful young bride in the person of Catherine Howard. Suffering from horribly ulcerated legs, the king was incapable of satisfying his cardinal desires. Catherine Howard was then charged with adultery, like her cousin Anne, and beheaded in 1542. Henry VIII's sixth and last wife, Catherine Parr, married him in 1543. She did so with little enthusiasm. Nevertheless, being a wise and sensible woman, with the experience of 2 previous marriages to draw on, she held her own in an undramatic manner and proved an excellent and affectionate stepmother to Mary, Elizabeth, and young Edward, the Crown Prince. It was then that Elizabeth began to spend more time at court and was able to observe her father at close quarters.